Yeah, well, I hear you. Sounds good. Um, but I have to say it like this. Um, I got good news and I got bad news. The bad news is things are getting much more complicated these days. The good news is things are getting much more complicated these days. But I must say that the best news is, for the moment, there's no more bad news. Uh, well, at least regarding internal operations. Extra-Regnum operations, we have a couple of businesses inside the Mexican Empire jurisdiction that have subsets doing business in other jurisdictions. And, well, it's getting awfully, it's getting awfully thin around these parts in terms of certain abilities. Um, that said, though, things are to be expected. When you have 22% drop in the global rail tonnage being moved, manufacturing in certain areas is down, and if there's less to manufacture, there's going to be less to move. So rail freight gets affected, um, truck freight gets affected, container freight by default is going to be affected. Anytime you talk about intermodal anything, whether it be from air to rail to ship, intermodal anything, if you affect the dynamics on one, you're automatically going to affect the others. And there are going to be ripple effects. Now, if there's less material and demand is weak, that's one thing. But if there's less material and demand is up, that's another. Right now, you're seeing globally a moderate increase in demand for certain things, certain goods. The price that folks pay for engaging in full environmental standards is health tax. The price that other folks pay will be a health tax and also a larger expense when they go to acquire things locally. Because there's going to be an increase in demand anyway, but not enough supply. Or if demand is the same but supply is not, it's down, there are going to be issues no matter how you slice this thing. Now, interestingly enough, the oil companies have gotten their wish. You have a massive amount of corn in the recent crops, and yet 100 million bushels less are being used for ethanol. And um, if they were using the corn stalk, I would be like, that's a great thing. But they're using the corn kernel for the ethanol, which makes no sense. It's 100 million bushels worth of corn more that will be available for food trade, though, for those who consume corn. I don't see the point of consuming corn, but if you're gonna, if you're gonna eat it, basically, of all the starches, that one is probably one of the least damaging. It's all a bad scenario, but what are you gonna do? If that's where you are in your eating habits. Anyway, um, but they're saying at the oil company level that they'll be acquiring 100 million bushels less available for them to use for ethanol, and they're not crying about it because they're saying, hey, well, ethanol's not making any money anyway. Exactly what they wanted to say. Ethanol is not a money maker, and that it's a huge tax on water supply, and you can't get so much power out of the kernel and corn rather, and you have to, because it burns at a lower BTU rate, you have to use a third more of that than you would regular petroleum gasoline, which is what they want folks to buy anyway, so they can continue to kill off um, folks long term with all the detriments that come from petroleum and solvents and the noxious oxides and everything else that goes along with it. So the global economy has to get smarter. Um, I'm not saying the Mexican Empire is the best, but a lot of folks need to catch up to the model that we're working with. We deal in the substance-based economy, and we're eco-friendly. And because our economy is an agriculture-based economy, well, we're not concerned about particular things that a lot of folks are concerned in. You're always going to have a demand for food, and you're always going to have a demand for clothing and shelter. Period. You're not going to get around it. And that's what we engage in. All the other stuff is whimsical, and folks can survive without acquiring that whimsical item. It's just the nature of how it is. So the good news is folks are waking up to hard realities that will force them to reevaluate where they stand. The bad news is a lot of folks are going to go through a whole lot of pain as they transition away from the commercial paper crap into the substance-based economy. But there will be those who will be hard-headed, they'll be stiff-necked, and they'll continue to engage in destructive practices. And it is what it is. But the monetary policy that the Moors in general should adopt is along the lines of what we're doing. Now, what they choose to do and what they actually do, can't speak to that one. But I would like to assemble the various houses of the Moors. This is no secret. We spoke about this before. I'm going to continue to speak on it. Assemble them for the issue of monetary policy. And we'll see where folks are at. And interestingly enough, I think that time is about right. And folks will either step up or they won't. But you never know till you ask, and we'll find out where folks are at. We'll see what's what.